This episode of Steve's Outdoor Adventures is sponsored by the Farwide app, outdoor intelligence in the palm of your hand.
Kyle Riley was a member of 1-2 Charlie Company, which deployed to Iraq at the end of January 2007. Charlie Company was flown to the Camp Virginia Army Base in Al Jawra, Kuwait, where they organized a caravan of trucks and Humvees, then drove hundreds of miles through Iraq to their forward operating base at Abu Hayat, located in the Al-Anbar province. Their FOB at Abu Hayat was located along the Euphrates River, where his squad would perform daily patrols and conduct operations to find and engage insurgents operating in the region. This area was hot for enemy activity, and Kyle and his unit were in contact daily. On April 9th, 2007, at approximately 5 p.m., Kyle and his squad were working their way back to the FOB when they were strategically ambushed and pushed toward a hidden IED, which the insurgents detonated just as Kyle got to cover. In the explosion, Kyle lost his leg, and in the ensuing gun battle, he was struck in the upper leg by a round from an AK-47. Badly wounded, Kyle Riley was evacuated by helicopter to a small field hospital before being flown to Landstuhl, Germany, and before returning stateside to Walter Reed Hospital for recovery and rehab. I first met Kyle Riley when he came to the Ponderosa Ranch on the annual Freedom Alliance cow elk hunt. He joined a small group of other hunters who were veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, men who had sustained injuries in combat, and we wanted to show them a good time. And I could tell right away when I met Kyle that he was passionate about hunting, he loved shooting, and I knew instantly after his first morning in the field that he was going to fall in love with elk hunting. Unfortunately, because of some changes in the regulations, we don't get the cow elk tags here at the Ponderosa Ranch anymore, and that means that we can't host our annual Freedom Alliance hunt. But then we found out about a new special tag program specifically for qualified veterans through the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife that would allow a limited number of tags each season, issued and available through qualified nonprofit organizations. I instantly thought of Kyle. To be a qualified veteran means a disabled veteran who is sponsored by an organization and provides to the department supporting documentation demonstrating that a veteran whose discharge or release from active duty was for a disability incurred or aggravated in the line of duty, or a veteran who was awarded the Purple Heart for wounds received in combat. And I knew that the Freedom Alliance was already a qualified organization, and I knew that because Kyle Riley had received a Purple Heart for his substantial injuries received in combat on April 9th, 2007, that he was going to be a qualified disabled veteran. So we applied for the tag, we were awarded the tag, and we planned the hunt for the last week in September during the peak of the rut, and I instantly started looking forward to the upcoming season. For this hunt, I set Riley up with a special rifle, a Bergara Premier Series Highlander, chambered in 7mm Remington Magnum and topped with the Burris 4-20 Veracity rifle scope. I put a custom turret on that scope that was cut specifically to the ballistics of the hand-loaded Pendleton ammunition. We also outfitted this rifle with a suppressor, which is something that we highly encourage and have gotten more and more involved in as time goes by. In fact, at the end of this program, I will tell you all about the suppressors and a project that we've been working on to make a special suppressor designed specifically for hunters. And Kyle is deadly accurate with this rifle, and I know that as soon as the sun rises on this day's hunt, we are likely to put an elk in the freezer and be home before lunch.
This week's Checking Zero was sponsored by the Adventure Armory, rifle, scope, and ammo packages for hunters. This segment of Steve's Outdoor Adventures has been sponsored by Pendleton Ammunition, loading bullets, one round at a time. This segment of Steve's Outdoor Adventures has been sponsored by Bergara Rifles, a passion for precision, every barrel, every rifle.
Prior to Kyle's arrival at the ranch, I'd been hunting the ranch extensively. I'd finally drawn an archery tag for the property, and I'd been in the field a lot, but I'd seen minimal elk activity, which is unusual for the Ponderosa because this is where the elk gather during the rut. But because we have this 5 Points pack of wolves operating in the area and basically taking up residence here, it pushed a lot of the elk off the mountain and down into the foothills. This pack has been getting bigger and bigger, and now there are a lot of pups to feed, and the wolf activity has picked up dramatically. All of our trail cameras were recording wolves almost on a daily basis, so I could see a problem starting to arise the closer we got to hunting season. The Ponderosa Ranch sits up on top of a mountain, and the elk tend to move down to the valley or into the foothills when there's too much hunting pressure in the area, or in this case, wolf pressure. The valley has a lot of private land with zero access, and the wolves tend to avoid the valley to avoid human interaction. So the elk feel safe here. Not to mention, they like irrigated alfalfa fields. So when I went down to scout the foothills for elk, it was no surprise that we found a lot of elk. We're not seeing a lot of elk activity up at the ranch right now. Lots of wolf activity, not a lot of elk activity. I think a lot of elk have moved down out of the higher elevation into this lower foothills country on the eastern side of the mountain. We've got a really good friend that owns the property just up over the top of this ridge. And from the looks of it, with hundreds of elk pouring down off of the ridge, it looks like a really good plan B. So, just in case, do a little scouting. And while I had a friend that I could call for a favor to get some access on the foothills, I didn't want to play that card just yet. I wanted to try and hunt the Ponderosa with Kyle because generally this is where the elk gather during the rut, and surely the wolves hadn't run off all of the elk. Since the early spring, I had been monitoring not just the wolves, but also the elk using trail cameras with a cellular connection. This allows me to smart scout for game without actually having to go out and hike around the ranch, glassing or checking cameras. I wanted to disturb the area as little as possible. We had been covered up with elk for months, but as we got into hunting season, the trail cameras started to go cold.
The night before my hunt, I did not sleep at all. I was too excited. I couldn't wait to get back out and hear the elk bugling again.
You can definitely tell the size of a bull in a particular area when you come across rub trees like this. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've seen giant bulls pick on little saplings. It happens. But when you come across a tree of this diameter, 9, 10 inches across, you're talking about a fairly decent sized tree. It's rubbed up, not real high, but it's rubbed deep. And this is a big bull. This is what you find an elite bull doing, is picking on trees of this size, peeling them. He's just shredded. The bark's on the ground, big diameter, big bull, big attitude, big tree. And when you find something like this, you know that at any moment you could find this bull and that's going to be an elite sized elk. We drove out and hit the usual hot spots, trying to locate bulls with cow calls and bugles, but with zero luck. And because I wanted to make sure that Kyle got a nice bull, I called on my good friends, Steve and Kathy Schlegel, who own the Mount Emily Cattle Company. They owned the majority of the land where all of the elk I had scouted were bedding during the day. And they had extended an invitation for me to bring Kyle to their property to hunt if it was needed. With this access, I was confident that we would find a nice bull for Kyle, and I decided that we would head there the next morning.
This segment of Steve's Outdoor Adventures has been sponsored by Burris Optics. Find what matters. This segment of Steve's Outdoor Adventures has been sponsored by Marathon Seat Covers. We've got you covered.
Because the elk had been feeding in the fields all night, the plan was to sneak past them in the dark, get high up on the hill, set up an ambush, and let the elk come to us. Anybody who's hunted elk knows that it's better to be waiting for a herd of elk to come to you than to be chasing them.
Waiting for these elk. They've been feeding in an alfalfa field about a mile that way. They're filtering up to us here. Got a cut hayfield right in front of us. Bedding areas all above us. In theory, they should come right by us. We should be in a good ambush spot.
While we were in the ambush spot, Kyle's dad, Dwayne, and the landowner, Steve Slagle, were down at the haystacks watching the elk as they made their way up to us.
There was a ridge in the middle, and some of the elk would go high and some would go down low, and Kyle and them were down low in the orchard. So we just kind of kept an eye on them, and as they disappeared around the ridge there, we just knew it was going to be a matter of time before we heard something.
I'm pumped. I just love when you can hear them coming.
As the elk appeared in the orchard, started filtering down towards us, and I was getting excited, and when we finally seen that bull, it was game time. When we finally seen that bull, I just cleared my mind and focused on it. And when he got down into our little clearing, we was able to get a better eye of him, judge him, and he was definitely a shooter. The crosshair's right where it needed to be, and just laid on the trigger.
You guys want him? Yeah.
Smoking. 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 There you go, buddy. Woo!
Get him, bro! Oh, shit. Yeah, y'all might want to edit that one. Dude. God, man.
This was one of my most memorable walks up to an elk. I knew it was a big bull, but I also knew what it meant to Kyle to be able to walk up to this bull and how special this moment was for him.
As long as I can remember, since I was a little kid, bull elk has always been my number one on my bucket list. I think they're the most majestic animal out there on the planet.
Solid.
Oh yeah.
It is that big six from the field.
Very symmetrical. He's clean.
Yeah, really clean.
He's one of the better sixes I've seen come out of him.
Come here, boy. Got some nice mass there, boy. That's nice. Congrats. Yeah, congratulations.
He made the first one count. It came out and he's like, what do you think? And I was like, hey, you're gonna kill that one.
After we field dressed and took care of the bull, we sat down with Kyle and his dad to talk about Kyle's time in Iraq, his deployment, and the men that he served with there. It's an interview that you don't want to miss.
This segment of Steve's Outdoor Adventures is sponsored by the Far Wide app. Outdoor intelligence in the palm of your hand. This segment is sponsored by Adventure Armory. Rifle, scope, and ammunition packages shipped, ready to shoot.
If you'd like to book this week's adventure for yourself, give our office a call. We will gladly take your calls, answer your questions, and help you book the hunting or fishing adventure of a lifetime. After Kyle filled his elk tag and we field dressed the bull and took care of everything, we sat down with Kyle and his dad to talk about his time in the Marine Corps, his deployment to Iraq, and what he remembers from that ambush that left him wounded and disabled.
I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, stationed in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. I deployed to Iraq in 2007, Operation Iraqi Freedom.
When we found out, it will flip your stomach because you have a loved one, your own child, that is putting his life on the line, and things can go wrong. When Kyle was deployed to Iraq, it hit home that with things going on that bad things could happen.
On April 9th, we were on patrol in the Euphrates River, and we was coming back to our fob, and I got hit with a 155 IED explosive device, cell phone detonation. They were on top of the hill, overwatching us from some little village, and just caught us by surprise.
I got the phone call from the captain. He was in Germany, and he gave the phone to Kyle, and we started talking, and I just thought it was a, hey Dad, how you doing? But it wasn't. And he says, I've been wounded.
As a result of the ambush, I lost my leg above the knee, and I was outfitted with a prosthetic leg, which able to get me back into the woods where I want to be. Prosthetic limits me. I'm not able to walk as fast in the woods, trip over sticks, and everything, just slow and all, especially climbing hills. That's a real obstacle there. Basically, once you get out of any branch, especially the Marine Corps, that is a diehard brotherhood. Everybody kind of goes their separate ways. We never really see each other anymore. So groups like Freedom Alliance and other groups, they just bring us back together, and we basically have that camaraderie again. Whether if we've knew them in the past or just met them, we have that bond, and they keep that alive for us. They really do.
In Abu Hayat, Kyle's squad began with 13 men upon their deployment. 3 of them were killed in combat. Since returning home, 6 of those other men have committed suicide. It's a hard statistic that every 22 minutes a veteran commits suicide. And I ask, no, I urge everyone watching today's program to reach out to someone if they believe they may be contemplating suicide. Reassure them that their life is worth living, that they are valuable. Ask them to join an organization like the Freedom Alliance, and together we can all work to make sure that all veterans understand that suicide is not the answer. Earlier in the show, I was discussing the use of suppressors in hunting. Not only does a suppressor greatly reduce the sound of a gunshot, but it also significantly reduces the recoil, especially in magnum calibers. It improves the harmonics of the barrel, reduces your muzzle jump, and improves your accuracy. However, most suppressors are too long and too heavy to put on a rifle for hiking around in the mountains. For this reason, we started working with a combat veteran-owned business to design a true hunting suppressor. The professionals at GPM worked with me to design a simple two-piece suppressor that is only 6.5 inches long and weighs only 10 ounces. These suppressors are not as quiet as the larger suppressors that have more volume. However, they are significantly smaller and a lot lighter, and they're the perfect tool for the average hunter to take into the field. We call these suppressors the Adventure Hunter series. And there's more information about these suppressors on our website for those of you who are interested. I was excited to have Kyle back to the ranch for this elk hunt, and I'm proud to call both Kyle and his dad, Dwayne, friends for life. And hopefully this time next year, we're talking about another elk hunt that we just completed with a terminally ill kid or a wounded veteran right here at the Ponderosa Ranch. And for any of you out there who have ever dreamed of going on a guided big game hunting adventure, whether it be for elk or mule deer, maybe a moose or a grizzly, or any big game hunt, give our office a call. We're always available to take your calls, answer your questions, and help you book the hunting or fishing trip of a lifetime. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this week's program. But please remember to join us again next week when we bring you another exciting episode of Steve's Outdoor Adventures.
We dedicate this week's episode of Steve's Outdoor Adventures to the following soldiers of 1-2 Charlie Company: